Welcome to the SessionWell podcast. My name is Adam Luke. I'm an associate marriage and family therapist and currently works in substance abuse and alcohol addiction.
I'm Judy and also an associate marriage and family therapist. I'm currently working at Renovare Counseling and Private Practice in Brea.
So what is SessionWell and why do you care? So SessionWell is a podcast that we created because Judy and I, when we were both in private practice as interns or associates, we found that there wasn't really a place where professional licensed clinicians, pre-licensed trainees, or the average Joe could go to hear about what the most current interventions or the new studies and good stuff that's coming out in therapy. So we wanted to create this space for you. Feel free to find us on Facebook, Instagram. We also have a group where you can actually speak into our community. And so thank you for listening.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for my brother Fred Yan with Kira Studios, who we have a new venue sort of. We're kind of in transition of just different spaces. He does all of our marketing, and if you ever need anything, whether it's websites or client lead generations, or videos, you can always contact him.
Alrighty, so today we're going to start off with a podcast that we haven't done before. It's a little anxiety inducing for myself, yet also something that I really like to use with clients. So we're going to be talking about coloring books and what do you call this?
Why is it anxiety inducing for you? This is the whole opposite of the purpose of
I know. So the coloring book side I know really well, but what is this?
My spread?
Your spread, but it's not calligraphy. You call it something else.
Well, there's calligraphy, there's brush lettering, paint nights, yeah. So the whole point, and like mandalas, I don't know. We literally Googled how to say that word right before, and both people said it differently, so whatever.
We heard mandalas.
Yeah. So what I wanted to do is that we are kind of I think self-care is one of those things that people are always talking about, and I really realized that for me, aside from like exercising and like alone time, I do think that when I'm doing something a little bit more focused and free, kind of like whether it's art or calligraphy or coloring books, that it makes me feel very like centered and very calming. And I know that adult coloring books is like a huge thing right now.
Yes.
My favorite one, and you can get it on Amazon, are like the curse word ones where it's like, oh, shit. Or like, like F you. And then you can just like color that as you're like, meditating on those wonderful words. But I do recommend a lot of coloring books and like art to just anyone that has anxiety or stress or anything like that. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit and like the benefits of adult coloring books. I even recently gave one of my girlfriends a 90s coloring book. She's like really into the 90s. And so that was kind of fun too.
Well, awesome. So before we get into the brush lettering, should we start with the coloring books?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want to open that and I'll speak about it?
Plethink
So I got this one at Michael's. I think this is actually a gift.
So this
one
one's
of my
called
friends.
Brain Boosters. It says that it's exclusively at Michael's.
Oh, okay. Yay, Michael's. And they're not very expensive. And so there's just all these different types of images. And it's cool because some of you guys can do it in crayons or markers or paint or however you want. And so benefits of coloring books in general is that one thing you have to remember is that coloring books and like this kind of art, it's not considered art therapy. So I think the Art Institute therapist people, important people, they were specific about it, and I get it, because I think art therapy is more relational. Like you have to take into consideration the client and therapist relationship.
Absolutely.
Whereas when we do art on our own, which is, although it's great, it's not actually art therapy. So I want to make that very clear.
So those who are pre-licensed or even licensed, another question you might have is there a certification? There absolutely is a certification. So if you call it art therapy, especially when you work with something like drug medical, they actually will say, do you have your certification?
Yes.
Otherwise, you can't call it art therapy.
Right.
So please.
So this is more interventions that we use.
Yes.
So benefits of coloring books in general, the main one, I think, reason why I use them is to reduce stress and to just be really more mindful and to reduce anxiety. And one of the reasons for that is that, for me, I like to know what's going to happen. Obviously, life is unknown. And so when you're coloring, what's really cool is that the end result is here. Like there's no, I guess, fear or anxiety about like what's going to happen, but it's just very focused. And for me, when it comes to just like my version of anxiety, like I'm a ruminator. And so I just constantly will ruminate on the things that are stressing me out, like things I have to do, and sometimes shutting off my mind is really difficult.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, when I'm coloring a specific pattern or like for me, I think I like you giving me something to color than me having to create something blank.
Yeah.
Like on a blank piece of paper. Because one, it's really structured, it's focused. And so for me, it takes me out of myself and the pressure of having to come up with something. It takes away from my thoughts. I get to focus more on color or pattern or just literally a big scribble if I need to. I'm feeling it that day.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the benefits. It's just like it keeps you in the
Absolutely.
present moment than like all these like psychotic, like crazy thoughts I'm having of like my day.
Absolutely. So the other side of this, so the reason why I've always liked the coloring books, you've heard the word said already today, mindfulness, right? It's a big buzzword, but what the heck does it mean? The biggest thing with coloring books is when you are actually engaged in the coloring book, you're actually coloring away, it is near impossible for you to either be future thinking or ruminating in your past, right? You're focusing on what you're doing. Another thing is, for clients that I've worked with in private practice, if they have a lot of anxiety, so option paralysis, which you were sort of talking about, there's even coloring books that it is color by numbers. They make it for adults.
Super easy.
So if you are literally like, well, yes, you gave me something to fill in, but I'm still just so worried on how this is going to come out, they have color by numbers. The thing that I really love about this as well is because psychodynamically you can tell so much by what you're doing, and as a therapist, what your client is processing. The way that I would look at things like this is when they actually are coloring, or if they bring this in, I've worked with it before. When I was starting out, I worked with victims of sexual abuse. So they would do coloring as their homework, right? And then we would go ahead and process that the next session. What you could tell is how they actually filled in whatever they were filling in. You would see, wow, someone really took time. It was a light shading. They really made sure that the space was covered. Then in another object on the paper, all of a sudden you could see there was a lot of white still. You could tell that they were really wrestling with the crayon or the colored pencil. And that tells you something. Your brush strokes in art therapy, they'll talk a lot about brush strokes. They'll talk about colors and dynamics that you're using. Something that I've loved to do with my clients is if I see them utilizing just like 3 certain colors, which it's funny, if you start coloring yourself, you'll notice that you are naturally drawn to certain colors, right? So like I love yellow, green, and red. That's like, I love those.
See, I would never use red because all I think about red is like fear, alarm, and like in teaching, we never grade with a red. Well, you're not supposed to. We don't ever really grade with a red pen because it signifies like failure and F, and you're like a loser. So we do more like other colors, like.
If you guys were wondering, you're a loser.
Or like when we paint our bedrooms and stuff, it's supposed to be like kind of more of a green, calming thing. But you're more than welcome to use red.
Well, and so you're highlighting that our experiences are very much our own, right? So I am not singular in why I use red. I use red for a very common reason. You guys can look it up if you ever really care. But different traumas and things in our past will dictate what we like to use.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I've always enjoyed this, because it also links you to your inner child, right? So much so we try to forget our inner child exists. And the truth is, they never go away.
They need to be taken care of even as an adult.
Absolutely. And even as an adult, now we have the potential to give our inner children what they didn't get back when those wounds were started, you know, when they happened.
And if you have like negative feelings from childhood in regards to like art and color, then this might not be the best intervention for you. But for a lot of us, it might have been a time where it was more simple, and all we really had to worry about was making sure that we were staying within the lines or outside the lines, and so that does help a lot. And scientifically too, when it comes to just like our childhood, a lot of us, when we are really anxious and really stressed, our amygdala part of our brain, which is our fear response, and like our anger and just stressful part of our brain gets very heightened. And so I think that when you are more focused on coloring or doing any of this kind of art stuff, it does decrease that like fight or flight response that we have with our amygdala, and then it does reduce cortisol, which is our stress hormone, and it just makes you feel a little bit more grounded. And so that's a lot of reasons why too that these are really helpful.
Because essentially you're building new neural pathways.
Yes.
So neurologically, you're changing your brain.
Mm-hmm.
We can find that a lot of times how we were raised is how our brain continually functions. So if someone raises their voice to me, if a stressful event walks into my life, then those previous neural pathways that we've forged of fight, flight, whatever happens, we will continue to use those. Where this is a great way if you feel yourself shortness of breath, you feel yourself worked up, have this in your car, have this in your office, have it wherever. This is a great thing for travel. But essentially, again, you feel yourself in a heightened state, start coloring and watch what happens. I've seen with some clients also, they say, Adam, I don't have any time in my day to stop and do something like that. Maybe you're waiting to pick up your kids at school and you color for 2.3 seconds. Believe it or not, you're going to feel the benefits of it. It's just sometimes we like to fight ourselves on that and say, oh no, I don't see how I'm going to have a benefit of it.
Exactly. And I've also read research too that it almost like doing 10 minutes of coloring is almost kind of the same effects as 10 minutes of meditation. Because the main point is mindfulness, is that it's taking you out of yourself and your stressful thoughts and just getting you to focus on something that doesn't have a lot of pressure. And then I was also reading when it comes to like brain stuff, because I love brain and like connection psychology, is that it does touch upon both hemispheres, the right and the left. And so that's actually helps improving focus and motor and your vision. And so the left part of your brain, which is more like logic, it is going to focus more on like, oh, there's a structure, like, there's lines. If I want to stay within the lines, that's helpful. But instead of focusing on my stressful work week or my kids or my marriage, I can just focus on these lines. But then it's also tapping into the right side of your hemisphere, which is more creative and emotional. And so it stabilizes your emotion by being able to touch into the colors you choose, like Adam was saying, and then makes you just feel a little bit more calm, which I think is like super important.
Probably the final thing I'll touch on with one of this is also, so maybe you have a family member that has unfortunately been diagnosed with dementia, Alzheimer's, any cognitive disease where they're starting to lose their functions. They've actually found that, again, coloring books isn't going to reverse it, but it's going to help that family member or individual maintain their motor functions and their recognition skills for a little bit longer, right?
Right.
So we're losing the battle, but we're not going to lose it as quick. And the reason being is, again, when you're coloring the mandalas, mandalas, whatever, however you want to say it, maybe they started with coloring them red. Well, then you'll notice that they continue through their red, or maybe they're using their other colors, but they're staying centric to whatever shape. So the squares are blue, the circles are green, whatever it is, but they're able to do it for the entire page. And that might not sound like you're winning such of a battle, but it is. It keeps them busy. It keeps them from essentially continuing their deterioration at such a rapid pace.
And you can do it right next to them. It
Absolutely.
could be not just bonding, but like you're kind of coloring next to each other. It's a very introvert thing, by the way, is to be in the same space, but like do our own thing and not have to talk. But it can be very healing for the relationship too, and just being able to like be with them in that calming space.
You sort of nailed that, or not sort of, you did. It's we don't understand sometimes that quality time together doesn't mean that we're watching a movie or we're talking, as long as we're sharing the space. So it is an awesome thing, especially if you get intergenerational, right? So you have grandma, you have you have your kid, and you're sitting at the table and you're coloring. You all are getting something out of that.
You can all just be doing. That's like my dream. I just thought about that. I'm like, I imagine one day having a child, and then myself and my husband and maybe a family member, and we're all just sitting in the room together, drinking coffee and coloring by ourselves. That sounds very relaxing for me. I also read two other benefits of it is the fact that it does supposedly help with sleep, because guess what we're not doing when we're coloring? We're not on our phones. So technology before bed is, you hear research all the time that it's bad for us, and like the backlight keeps us up. If you can't sleep and then you go on your phone, you basically just increase the amount of time that you can't sleep. So if you're coloring before bed, that also is going to take you outside of technology, which also improve your sleep, which will improve your health, which improve your mood. So it's all connected.
Yes. I mean, again, look at how much, what your FaceTime is with your phone, your screen time. That will highlight how much time we waste on our phones.
No.
So if you're plugged in with your phone, the one thing I can tell you is you're not plugged in with a person.
Mm-hmm.
So emotionally, you are not doing well. I think people don't realize that social media does not feed the soul.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is largely there as a distraction.
Absolutely.
But let's hear more about the brush lettering. This is something that if you follow Judy on Stumble Strong on Instagram, she has been doing more of this, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, and people always ask me, like, "Oh, I want to see your work," and like, "Are you getting better?" And I'm gonna admit, I suck at calligraphy and art and penmanship, all that. I just do it simply for self-care. Like, I'll sign up for these workshops, and literally, it's usually about 2 to 3 hours. And for me, that is 2 to 3 hours where I'm by myself. And yes, there's people in the room too, but like, no one's really like talking to you. You're just, you have an instructor, and they kind of just let it free. They kind of tell you how to do it a little bit, and then you just kind of do it. And so sometimes like this, like just looking at this lovely palette, and those of you that are listening, like on the podcast, you might not be able to see it, but if you're watching us, yay. So like just looking at this palette makes me very happy. Like, does it make you happy?
It is bright. I will say that. I don't know if I say happy, but it definitely, when I saw you bring it out, I was like, oh, wow.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like to do this, and so this is like, so I've done calligraphy, I've done brush lettering, I've done watercolor brush lettering, and so just recently I actually went to this really cool workshop, and then at the end of this podcast I'll tell you like all the places like where I normally would go, and so if you want to just actually invest in workshops and like your own self-care, I can give you some tips on like what are really good places in Orange County. But so I had gone to a watercolor brush lettering recently, and the person that was leading it, her name is Nicole Miyuki Santo, and this is her book that I had purchased. She signed my book too, which I was really excited about. And I bought this book because in here there's a bunch of different activities that you can do, but is very art form. So you can use all the things you learned in the class, and then she even talks about in here how this is a space for yourself and just to be creative. There's no right or wrong answer. And then also have like kindness for yourself and like the thing that you end up producing. And then something like this, even for a name card, something as like pretty as just saying my name. When Adam saw it, Adam was like, "Ooh, that's really good. You nailed that one." I was like, "I didn't do it. She did it." I'm like, mine kind of sucks. But for me, calligraphy and brush lettering is also kind of a form of adult coloring because yes, I can produce a word, like, you know, like positive affirmations, but I can also choose the color, I can choose the brush strokes. It's really free-flowing, like you can be more bubbly, you can also be really like pretty and straight, but it's just another form of art that I really like that is different from coloring books. It's just something that I enjoy. Not everyone's going to enjoy it, but I really like it.
And I think it's something that's, I can't open Facebook without seeing a Pinterest post of some new calligraphy or brush lettering. And I think that's why I said that it was anxiety provoking, because I know so little bit about it, but I know that there's so much growth in the area because you're hearing about more and more classes. I really appreciated how you pointed out, you know, I'm doing this for me, not for anyone else.
Oh, yeah.
I think that takes a certain amount of courage that we don't really think about, right? You don't need to justify why you do it, but I know that it has been such, it has very much been your safe space for a while. Yes. And it's cool to watch you do it because it does look like something that's challenging.
It is, and I think that every time I first enter these classes, I'm always like, okay, I want to make sure I do it right. But there's no such thing as doing it right, especially when it comes to art and coloring and painting and mixing all the colors and that kind of stuff. And so the first couple of minutes, I always have to be really careful of like not comparing my work to the person next to me. And just kind of more like, instead of being like, oh, she's really good at that, but my letters don't look as good, that you have to kind of just let that go. And I think that's why I come into this type of self-care, because it's not about what looks right or good or better than someone's or as good as someone's. More just like just be in a space where you just get to free flow and just do it. And so for me, that's really helpful because I'm very much like in my head all the time. And so I think to just, the thought of spacing out 3 hours to just color on any normal day, I'm like, yeah, right. Like I have I have a million things to do. But I think that when I feel myself being run down, like it's like summertime and I want to do something that's just for me, even though it can be kind of costly, I'm going to sign up for one of these workshops.
There you go. So how about integration? How would I use this in some other aspect? So I talked a little bit about working in substance abuse and how we've used coloring books, but I wanted to talk also about a parenting side that sometimes people don't realize. So parenting, I don't have a child at this time, but I've worked with plenty of families and developing males on how to bridge the lack of word gap, I would say. Especially with young boys and even men, sometimes we run out of words, and our words or our emotions then come out as anger or frustration.
Right.
So what you can use in this is, so instead of just saying, hey, it's going to be your self-care for your free time, sometimes we have to be more intentional of if you have a son who is frustrated, you can see that they're frustrated. And instead of saying, hey, I'm going to just place you on a timeout, maybe because you realize the timeout's only further frustrate him and he's about to pop and it's only going to make it worse, it's going to throw him into a meltdown. You're going to use, instead of creating a negative atmosphere, you're going to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and color. And
I love that.
The cool thing is, if as a parent buy 2 coloring books of the same coloring book, and then you're going to sit with him and you're going to color the same page, but you're going to do it in your own style, he's going to do it in his own style. The reason being is, again, you're sharing the space and you're also bringing him back to present. So his anger, frustrations, the rage. I know a lot of parents go, wow, I have a 9-year-old kid, but when he gets mad, he really scares me with how intense his emotions get. A lot of it, again, we have developing children that don't have words to put to their frustrations. So you yourself get that angry as well when you don't have the words. Think of times that you've argued with your spouse, with your parents, and you're a grown adult, yet you can become so activated, right? But this is another way that instead of creating a punishment, we're going to redirect it and get the same experience out of it. And it's, I know I can already hear some parents are like, well, that's a softy technique. Actually, it's a technique that works.
Yeah.
And what are you looking for? Are you looking to be right, or are you looking to be whole? Which one do you want? Because you're going to have to give on 2 sides. If your secondary gain is, I want a child who's emotionally present, isn't on fire, and we're not going to be fighting for the rest of today, then how about you color with them?
Right.
And because that way, once you're done coloring, if you need to, set a timer. I'm a big one on, I understand people have multiple children sometimes. Set a 15-minute timer. Say 15 minutes, we're going to color. And at the end of that session, when it goes off, go, oh, let me see yours, let you see mine. And sometimes that's enough as you need to do. The kid is now back to present. The anger has subsided. You can still further process maybe what happened, but you're not at each other's throat. So application for parents, that works great.
And it does connect mind, body, everything, because it's physically, it's emotionally, it's mentally, like it's all of it. You're not just having them, I don't know how timeouts really work, but like you're not just having them sit in the corner and just think about their 4-year-old selves, but it's kind of like you're tapping into like their hands and their mind. And also, if you go to most restaurants, like what do they have for kids? It's always coloring. It's always crayons and coloring. And why do they do that?
Because kids go silent. And I'm not making a joke there. It is because kids go silent. So that other aspect of, again, bringing them present, but you brought up earlier, rumination. So when we send a kid away for timeout, if the kid is so frustrated emotionally, doesn't understand, is failing to grasp, is just seeing red, and then we're going to go, oh, you're going to go sit in your room for 30 minutes. What are they going to really do? And if we really shared that space in our own hearts, think back to when we were kids and we got thrown on timeout, we weren't thinking of, oh, I made a poor choice.
Right. I'll do better.
It was
next
really
time.
just we were more pissed off until we forgot about
Right.
it. And then all of a sudden we're good. So essentially we're teaching kids to bury it.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And not redirect it in a healthier way.
Exactly. Let's redirect it and we can still communicate about it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who's an MFT and she uses coloring books with her husband.
Oh, I was thinking about that right now. You're talking about like in a couple.
When they get friggin' pissed off, it's like, well, we gotta go to the coloring books. We gotta go to the and I can totally get it because I try to put myself in his shoes. And I was like, if my wife ever stopped me mid-argument and was like, here's your book, color away, I'd be like, oh, but they said, dude, it has literally made it easier. And then we talk about business conversations. When we've talked about Gottman, Judy and I are both certified as trainers for the 7 principles of making marriage work. But how you utilize this is some people, when they're doing their business conversations, so you're talking about bills, you're talking about maybe needs that aren't being met, how to meet your spouse's needs. People have utilized coloring because this is just my saying, this is the redneck way to EMDR. And so eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. Yeah. The reason being is I'm getting a bilateral stimulus by going ahead and coloring and speaking to you. Yeah. Right? So if we revert back to whether it's your spouse or it's your kid you're sitting with, you can actually tell in your conversation where they're getting amped up or where they're coming down. Because that kid that's first on this timeout of coloring, they're going to be ripping and tearing with that crayon. It's not going to be necessarily about detailed work as much as it's getting aggression out. And maybe you start noticing your spouse and your communication starts going faster. Right. Why are they going faster? It's probably because you've hit something. So if we allow ourselves a space, huge intervention. Yeah.
And so we love, I think kind of one of the reasons why we started SessionWell was because we didn't know what we were doing when we first left graduate program. It's okay, people talk about interventions, but I think the most helpful is picking an intervention that we can use across all populations. Yeah. And so this is one of our favorites is that you said we can use it with children, we can use it with parenting, you can use it with teens, you can use it with couples, you can use it for yourself, obviously. And so being able to just kind of tailor it to your needs, I think is really awesome. And that's why we kind of like this type of really simple intervention. And so kind of what was I gonna say? Oh, so where I normally go. So if you guys want to know, is there anything else you wanted to add before I just kind of go into where they can get these things? So the easiest one I would say is Amazon and Michael's, or any place that there's an art craft store like Joann's or something. And so I know on Amazon you can literally type in any word / coloring book, and so many options will come up, and they usually range between I would say $9.99 to a little bit more.
Yeah, they're not terrible.
No. This one from Michael's was only $10, and there's tons of stuff in here. Different shapes, different patterns, different images, so that's helpful. My favorite place to do brush lettering, calligraphy, even needlepoint or punch needle is M. Lovewell in Santa Ana. It's off of 4th Street. They're the cutest stationery store. They have no idea that I'm plugging them. I just really like them. And it's something that they have workshops every Saturday and Sunday, and they run from 2 to 3 hours. I will say it's a little bit more costly than an Amazon book, but that's where I get to just be in a creative space. You can buy all their supplies if you want, and then just kind of, and they also have really good snacks and really good beverages when you're there. And then my other, and this is a personal plug because she's my friend, but her name is Natasha May, and her website is tashavision.com, and she holds a lot of the mandala workshops for herself, for other people, and then she also is currently doing a brush lettering thing. So awesome. You just Google it, you can find a lot of stuff to help you. But the main point of this is for us to just promote mindfulness, healing. Life is freaking stressful. And
absolutely.
Anything to reduce that amount of stress for our bodies is great.
I think we nailed it.
Alrighty. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Yes, thank you so much. Always check up on the YouTube page, SessionWell. We also have our Instagram. We normally throw in some daily goodness. So if you're looking for a little pick-me-up, please follow us on SessionWell on Instagram. As always, thanks to Fred Yen and Kira Studios. And we're signing out. So have a safe drive. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.